UFC 259 was expected to be the biggest card of the year, and it was definitely memorable. This Friday night, there's a host of events on UFC Fight Pass, and UFC Fight Night this weekend is Edwards versus Muhammad. Welcome to Cage Minds MMA show. I'm Micah Frankel. There's nowhere else to start off today's episode than with UFC 259. I mean, first off, we know there's controversy. We know there's storylines. But there was 15 fights slated to happen when I did this show last week. And by the time we got to Saturday night, there was 15 fights that we got to watch. That's like a miracle in of itself that we saw like just one person, Askar Askarov, miss weight by just a single pound. Really good stuff, actually. It led us to what we thought would be an incredible night, and it was some great action. Let's start at the bottom and work our way all the way to the top, right? That's how we did it, so that's how we'll do it. Trevin Jones. Was that a hybrid uppercut, kind of hook punch? Whatever it was, Mario Batista did not see it coming. The TKO win in the second round. Officially now his first UFC victory. Somebody to definitely keep an eye on there at 135 pounds. Speed, great striking. Trevin Jones, congratulations. Then we get one of the most concerning stoppages of the night. We're having a theme recently with the UFC. The commission having some problems there in Vegas. We've got some wacky judging. We've got some wacky stoppages. Uros Medic, the Contender Series veteran, 100% finishing rate, keeping that intact, clipping Alan Cruz with hooks, stuffing takedowns, and making Cruz pay at every moment for attempting the takedowns. Let's be honest, it was a vicious striking. Those were some great hooks, and it was a lack of attention by Mark Smith. We all saw Cruz moving maybe enough to stay in the fight, but 67 unanswered ground strikes. The fight lasted longer than it should have. Uros Medic, a lightweight to keep an eye on. Again, 7-0, 100% finishing rate, but Mark Smith drops the ball. You got to get in there and protect the fighter, and you did not do that for Alan Cruz. Where the very next fight, we have a totally opposite example. We have the stoppages that we'd like to see, I believe. Or, as some have proposed on Twitter, maybe just the stoppages we're seeing in some of the female fights. Amanda Lemoyne just teased off on Livia Souza. Souza, a former Invicta FC 105-pound champion at atomweight. A credit that she's been competing 10 pounds up at strawweight, but you could see a big strawweight here in Limoges versus a small strawweight, nearly atomweight in Souza, and the difference was how Souza was getting impacted by these giant right hands and being flung to the ground. Jason Herzog jumping in for the stoppage after the second knockdown. It was a good stoppage. It was protecting the fighter. That's how fights should be called. We didn't see 67 unanswered ground strikes. Souza was not out when she hit the ground, but she was being overwhelmed, and the appropriate stoppage happened. None of this, oh, it's a title fight. Oh, none of this, the referee is giving the fighter a chance. It's either a stoppage or it's not a stoppage, right? It seems pretty clear cut. Fighter safety, you're being overwhelmed, we're stopping the fight. That's what we saw in Lemoyne versus Souza. Just if we could see that all the time. Keep going on these early prelims, which again, UFC, this was a wacky deal. Early prelims on UFC Fight Pass. Prelims on ESPN2. More prelims on ESPN. And then that ESPN Plus pay-per-view. I thought it was a jungle to navigate, and you can imagine just what that was like for the everyday fan to try to keep up with where this event was taking place. Sorry, still continuing on the early prelims though, a fight that I had picked as the fight that had to be highlighted was not getting enough traction and enough talk because it was going to lead to somebody being right near the rankings. Sean Brady, Jake Matthews, both incredible welterweight prospects, and it was Brady taking Matthews to the ground, showcasing a suffocating top game, his grappling, his hip pressure, not allowing Matthews to do anything offensive off his back or find any way to get off of his back, and was able to lock in a nasty arm triangle choke for the finish in the third round. Sean Brady definitely on a short list of prospects to be watching there in the welterweight division. There's another guy that's been getting a lot of hype. It's supposed to be in the main event coming up this weekend. I think that kind of talk should be how we're talking about Sean Brady. Now 14-0, a former CFFC champion who's just been dominating here in the UFC. Sean Brady, the best tattoos in MMA. He is the guy that you should be paying attention to. Light heavyweight division, you had Carlos Ulbrich. He comes out early, just teeing off on Kenny Nwanjaku. Head kicks had Nwanjaku in trouble. Ulbrich was applying pressure, finding his openings. Nwanjaku was just covering up, being put against the cage and absorbing shots. Several times you could hear the ref warning Nwanjaku that if he did not fire back, the fight would be stopped. But eventually, in the second round, Nwanjaku got Ulbrich to exchange with him, and when he let 3 punches go, even though the first 2 missed, that third right hook right to the chin, dropping Ulbrich, and Kennedy gets the come from behind TKO victory there in the second round. Man, it is playing with fire when you have your hands down and your chin up. Hopefully Ulbrich will correct those defensive flaws. Jordan Espinosa versus Tim Elliott. The story of the fight was Jordan Espinosa with some ill-timed high kicks that Elliott was able to see coming in, ducked under, was able to get on to Espinosa's legs and complete the takedowns, spending the majority of the fight on top. The second and third round, dominating rounds where we get to the scorecards, and one judge goes 30-25. When we talked about earlier, there's been problems with commissions. There's been inconsistency. Inconsistency on stoppages, inconsistency on scoring. This fight, 2 rounds of dominating top control from Elliott, the second and the third. One judge rewarding him with 10-8s in one of those rounds without causing an extreme amount of damage, without being close to the finish. That's prevalent to keep in mind for later on in the show. But Tim Elliott had a perfect game plan, was able to get on top, never let Espinosa off the ground, and collects a unanimous decision. As for the talk that the two were engaging in when they were down on the ground, I'm not fully informed in the situation. We'll see if that plays out more in media. We know both fighters have, and camps have already made statements. But again, Elliott with a dominating win on the ground. Kind of surprising how well he was able to manipulate Espinosa. Continuing with the flyweight action, you had Kai Kara France against Rodrigo Borontin. Borontin looking good early, able to land some strikes, gets the fight to the ground, and for a guy with a ton of victories by rear naked choke, he was right where he wanted to be, on Kara France's back. The New Zealand fighter was able to get back to his feet, get Borontin off his back, and then when he came in to strike, went over, under, over with the big right hand and flattens Borontin, face plants, and then the chaos ensues as Kara France walks off calling the TKO, but Herb Dean making contact with France, let him go, goes to check on Borontin, doesn't totally wave off the fight, and Kara France comes running back in for one more strike before Herb Dean is able to grab Kara France. You see Borontin hop up angry. He believed the fight was over, thought that Kara France was obviously going overboard, went to throw his mouthpiece at him. Oh man, what chaos ensuing. Thankfully nothing went on after that, but Herb Dean with a little timid bit of a finish leads to a bit of chaos there. Kara France though, in a bad position, escapes it, gets the knockout. What a win. Then we also have one more flyweight encounter, and that saw Oscar show most of his potential, out wrestling, out striking Joseph Benavidez. It appears that the former title challenger is now on the downhill of his career, where Askar was able to beat him up, cut him up, and the Russian looked as good as advertised heading into this fight. There's a reason why he came in with that number 3 ranking and will be the number 2 title challenger in the division, waiting to see what happens with Moreno Figueiredo rematch. Closing out the prelims, the former bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz returned to form. The number 11 ranked contender taking on unranked Casey Kenny, the former 2-division LFA champion, and Cruz did not disappoint on this night. His pinpoint striking was able to take advantage of Kenny. He was able to really break down Kenny throughout the fight, applying pressure and hitting timely takedowns for points at the end of the round. Vintage Dominic Cruz in getting back in the win column. We go to the pay-per-view main card, and it started off with light heavyweight action. Alexander Rakic versus Thiago Santos, and kind of a lackluster fight from what most people expected. A very measured performance. Rakic able to land strikes from the outside, then get in and hold Santos against the fence in the clinch. More people, including myself, expected Rakic to hit his takedowns, considering how good he looked on the ground against Anthony Smith in his last fight. But this one was a slow-paced, methodical fight, a lot of outside striking, and Rakic, it looked to be very concerned with the Thiago Santos of the old. A Thiago Santos who cannot move like he did before. The explosion looks to be away from Santos after having that horrible knee injury. Rakic possibly paying too much respect to a guy that he had once trained with. In all, though, Rakic, another victory, and the young man still continuing to move towards a championship opportunity. But this was the night where he could have stole that number 1 contender spot from Glover Teixeira, and he fell short of doing that, even though he gets the victory. Moving on to the lightweights, it was Drew Dober versus Islam Makhachev, and Makhachev, the Nurmagomedov protege, was able to get on the inside, get his body lock, fight with the feet, and get the inside and outside trips, getting the fight to the ground, and moving seamlessly through the positions from half guard to side control mount, and even get to the back mount, nearly finishing the fight in the first round with an arm bar, while then finally submitting Drew Dober with an arm triangle is what they called it, but it was really just shoulder pressure, not even the fully locked up arm triangle, just shoulder pressure against the carotid artery, able to get the tap without being fully in position, not having the submission locked in, and just shoulder pressure from half guard. This is incredibly rarely seen high level stuff from Islam Makhachev. As you see, another wrestler and from Russia looking to make a march towards that UFC lightweight title. Makhachev calling out Tony Ferguson. Now we get to the controversy. The first of 3 title fights on the night. Peter Yan blasted Aljamain Sterling with an illegal knee. Sterling's knee was down on the mat. That makes him a downed opponent. He got blasted in the face, and referee Mark Smith calls the foul a disqualification, saying that he verbally announced that Sterling was a downed opponent, and Yan went ahead with the illegal maneuver. I questioned that whole process a little bit because an English-speaking ref yelled out to a Russian fighter who I've seen understand very little English as I was watching his press conferences using a translator. That one's a little hard to swallow, that he fully understood what was happening. Should an MMA fighter understand the rules? Yes. I just am questioning the validity of the ref yelling out the opponent was down. How he would acknowledge that. If you're saying he's acknowledged me before, I'm pretty sure the fighter's been told in his language. If the ref is talking, keep nodding your head like you understand. That one could be a little questionable. Was the maneuver illegal? Totally. Was the outcome proper? Should the title change hands from a disqualification? I don't believe that should be the case. I believe it should have been a no contest, but that there needs to be something worked into the contracts where if a champion does get disqualified, that they lose some of their money. That's the way to make somebody remember the rules. Make it a financial impact. Yes, it's a huge detriment to Jan that he lost the title, but with the controversy surrounding the fight, most people having it scored or about to be scored, the illegal strike lands with 30 seconds left in that fourth round. We were 30 seconds away from Peter Yan being up 3-1 to Aljamain Sterling on 2 scorecards, and at least 2-2 on the other. That one a surprising scorecard. I didn't have it 2-2. With the dominance that was being, and the way the fight was going, with the more significant strikes, with the strikes that were stunning the other party being landed by Jan, I was surprised to see just how it played out. You heard John McCarthy. If you haven't heard Big John's podcast, he suggested that Mark Smith should have sent the fight to the scorecards. I don't know if that's justifiable either, because it's just ending the fight. It was an illegal foul. It feels, though, also weird to crown a champion, because you always hear, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, in this case, it was the man messed up, so we'll give you the title. Aljamain Sterling is the bantamweight champion. We're going to have a lot more on this topic on the Micah Frankel's Cage Minds podcast. You can find that on Anchor FM. Aljamain Sterling becomes the 7th bantamweight champion in UFC history, and that is the fact right now. We move on to the co-main event, where it was feeding time. We got to see the Lioness feed. Amanda Nunes came out with 1-2s, stunning Megan Anderson from the get-go, knocking Anderson down to the ground, and then as Anderson tries to escape, giving up her back, the champion locks up a reverse triangle choke, combination with an armbar. The Brazilian submits the Australian. I don't know what's next at 145 pounds for Amanda Nunes. There's been speculation that the UFC isn't really inclined to continue building that division, and maybe they'll let it ride off into the sunset. Well, Nunes can now focus on dropping back down to 135 pounds, which coincidentally could lead to a fight with Juliana Pena. Unfortunately, Holly Holm has had to withdraw from the Pena fight, and Dana White has left inklings that he may be going down a path to make Nunes versus Pena. I question that one a little bit, considering just 5 months ago we saw Juliana Pena tapping out to a Germaine de Randamie who has a longer win streak. Yes, she is coming off of a recent attempt to become champion and lost to Nunes, but beating Pena, I don't think Pena should earn a championship fight off of one win. We move up to the main event, and could Israel Adesanya become a champ? Could he be the 5th name on that list, challenging Jan Blachowicz in what turned out to be a tactical, striking, kickboxing matchup for the first 3 rounds? Adesanya looking to work his jab, his outside low kicks, staying lateral, staying light on his feet, not wanting to exchange. Well, Jan Blachowicz was countering with a power jab, trying to find his right hand, trying to look for big combinations, but really was getting picked off and sniped, it felt like, by Adesanya. The first round was definitely Adesanya's. The second round, a much closer round. The third round, it felt like you could go Adesanya again. The commentary for the UFC, basically you were getting the feeling from them that it could be 30-27 Adesanya heading into the 4th round. Now, I told you guys, judging played a big part of this fight card. But I haven't mentioned the judging since we were talking about Espinosa Elliott. Well, the judging would come back into play here in this main event, as the 4th round would see Jan Blachowicz spend well over 3 minutes of top time on top of the middleweight champion Adesanya, not overwhelmingly using ground and pound, but holding the champ down, never letting Adesanya move, and Blachowicz was landing shots in between. It was a 220-pound man hitting a 200-pound man. You could see the visual impact that some of these shots were having, landing to the ribs of Adesanya, and how frustrated he was on bottom. Fast forward to the 5th round, and you would see the same thing occur. We go to the judges' scorecards. Some people wondering, could we have a new champion? Guessing they're proposing that it could be a 48-47. That's 3 rounds to 2 for Adesanya. But I couldn't even, and did not at the time, have it scored as the judges did, as you hear 49-46 and 49-45 2 times. What does that mean? That means that the judges scored the 4th and the 5th rounds 10-8 for Blachowicz, with that ground dominance, never allowing Adesanya to mount any offense from his back, not attempting submissions, not able to get off significant strikes. That the domination and control Blachowicz displayed had overwhelmingly impressed the judges, giving him a dominant round. Dana White later was not pleased with the scorecards. And again, it wasn't that Elliott Espinosa fight. No, he had no problem with that one. But the dominance that Blachowicz had displayed in the 4th and 5th rounds was not good enough for the UFC president, who was dismayed, who said we have to work at this thing. And just in case you didn't know how it's actually written down, the score at 10-8 is utilized by the judge when the judge sees verifiable actions on the part of either fighter. The judge shall always score a score of 10-8 when the judges has established that one fighter has dominated the action of the round, had through the duration of the round, and has impacted their opponent with their effective striking or effective grappling maneuvers that have diminished the abilities of their opponent. Yeah, you saw a different Adesanya in the 5th round. He was not moving as fast. He was tired out from being on bottom throughout that 4th round. So much that his 5th round output on the bottom was less than the 4th round. That was domination, and I gotta actually agree with the judges. I feel that from the Espinosa Elliott fight to Blachowicz Adesanya, we had what we were looking for. Consistency from the judges. And it's amazing to me that Dana White didn't notice that there were 2 examples of the same night and there was consistency, unlike my problem earlier in the night where the Medic Alon, or the Medic Cruz stoppage and the Lemoyne Souza stoppage are totally inconsistent from each other, and that's the kind of stuff that needs to be taken out of the sport. Not judging that you don't agree with. I mean, there could be a million different scorecards with a million different people watching. Like I said, UFC 259 was a wild night. Time for some headlines. The UFC's heavyweight division is ever changing, and it couldn't be more evident than the moves that were made last week. Longtime heavyweight Stefan Struve, who many of us have seen growing up inside the octagon, has said due to lingering health conditions, he has been forced to retire. The UFC also making a couple business moves in the heavyweight division, releasing former heavyweight champion Junior Dos Santos and multiple-time heavyweight champion in other promotions, never was able to reach that illustrious feat in the octagon, Alistair Overeem. Both are transitioning on, and we will wait to see what happens next. Dos Santos has said he's taking some time to regroup, and Overeem had stated before that the UFC title was his last goal. Possibly maybe an Overeem Fedor fight. Anyone want to see that? Keep our eyes on what's happening with those legends. Talk a little liquor with you guys. Jose Cuervo has bought out the controlling majority share of Conor McGregor's Proper 12 Irish Whiskey Company. Be interesting to see when the figures come out how much money McGregor was able to make off that deal and what kind of role he'll have with the company going forward. Does this mean that he'll have enough money to retire, or does this mean he'll have more time to focus on his combat sports career? Which way this goes will be interesting to see. Talking about money, the UFC, if you saw last weekend's UFC 259, you saw new little highlights around the octagon of DraftKings logos and a DraftKings clock. In all, the DraftKings UFC deal will last over the next 5 years and will make the company $350 million. They're hoping to bring new fans and new excitement to the sport with plenty of avenues and opportunities for betting and gambling. A couple exciting fights that have been announced. Jim Miller's going to be back in action April 10th. He will be stepping into the octagon for a record 33rd time when he takes on Joe Zielecki. Another fan favorite's going to be back in action May 1st. Longtime UFC vet Cub Swanson is going to be facing Giga Chikadze. That one has the potential for a crazy striking affair. Jimmy Flick, Contender Series alum, is going to be facing Francisco Figueiredo, the brother of the flyweight champion, on May 8th. And it was recently announced that May 15th, UFC 262, Shane Burgos is going to be facing Edson Barbosa Jr. and Jordan Wright's going to be taking on Jamie Pickett in a middleweight bout. Also, a quick turnaround for Maxime Grishin, looking to rebound from a loss 2 weekends ago. He'll be taking on Ovince St. Preux on June 26. We said a moment ago there was a lot of craziness going on around the bantamweight title with the controversy between Jan and Sterling. It would appear that Dana White wants to rebook the rematch as soon as possible. And Triple C, yes, the former flyweight, former bantamweight, former Olympic wrestling gold medalist Henry Cejudo has ended his short-lived retirement and has announced on ESPN Sports Nation that he is going to be returning to the bantamweight division to reclaim his crown, a short-lived retirement. But did Cejudo ever really go away? I mean, the minute he retired, he was calling out Ryan Garcia. He was calling out Alexander Volkanovski. He was calling out for these huge paydays. And when those weren't available, he's now willing to listen to Dana White again, go take the contract he's offered, and return back to the bantamweight division. Seems like the UFC's hold and wait tactic in negotiations has paid off for them. Bellator's hoping the third time is the charm, as the promotion has rebooked Sabah Hamasi to face Paul Daly at Bellator 257 on April 16th. In PFL news, they've announced that the second event of the 2021 season will take place on April 29th, featuring welterweight and light heavyweight action. The main event will see the debut of free agent signee, former Bellator welterweight champion Roy McDonald against 2019 finalist David Merchard. 2019 welterweight champion Ray the Cooper III will be taking on Jason Poyet, and 2019 light heavyweight champion Emilio Sorde will be taking on UFC vet Chris Camozzi. The featured prelim will see 2018 PFL welterweight champion Magomed taking on former WSOF welterweight title challenger Yao Zeffirino. What to look forward to this weekend? Well, a whole ton of events on UFC Fight Pass. A stacked Friday full of events, starting off early in the morning with Quinet Fight Night 6 grappling from Tokyo, Japan, followed by Lion Fight 64, Muay Thai action, the art of 8 limbs on display. The card will feature several familiar names, including former King of the Cage champion and Legacy FC vet Andy Wynn taking on Crystal Van Wyk. You also have heavyweight semi-finals, 2 of them going down. You're going to see Warren the Destroyer Thompson taking on UFC vet, former Legacy FC and King of the Cage champion Cody the Freight Train East. You also have Terrence El Jefe Hodges versus Bazooka Joe Stripling in the other semi-final. Also on UFC Fight Pass Friday, CFFC 93 middleweight title bout headlines the card, where Colin Huckabee faces Aaron Jeffrey. Both fighters come in at 9-2. UFC Fight Pass will also be hosting from South America, Lux 102. And then the feature event of Friday is LFA 101. Go to cageminds.com for the results. The card is taglined The Undefeateds. 13 unbeaten fighters in all will be on the card. The main event, light heavyweights, both undefeated. Anthony Kalani taking on T. Cummings. Co-main event, Jalen Fuller, who I talked to this past weekend on the mic on the Sports Animal, faces Tristan Vines. So full Friday of action. Then Saturday, UFC Fight Night, Edwards versus Muhammad, a ESPN Plus exclusive welterweight main event. Number 3 ranked Leon Edwards against the number 13 ranked Belal Muhammad. This is the first time we're seeing Leon Edwards since July of 2019. COVID pandemic canceled his fight with Tyron Woodley and has also halted 3 scheduled bouts with Kazmat Chimaev. But Edwards is on an 8-fight win streak, and with Usman coming off of the win over Gilbert Burns, who was the most logical title challenger, a huge performance from Edwards could slide him right into the title fight that he's oh so wanted. It's an 8-fight win streak since he lost to the champion Usman. It's been a evolution of his skills, showing his striking and his grappling. Now Muhammad, the opponent, comes in on just 4 weeks' notice. We saw Muhammad, who's won 8 of his last 9 and is on a 4-fight win streak, at UFC 258, pick up a decision victory over Thiago Lima. Lima didn't get much done in that fight, but he did land double-digit calf kicks. So you got to wonder how the health of Muhammad's front leg is doing as he heads into this fight. I've heard guys say it takes 2 to 3 weeks just to recover from those calf kicks. Muhammad has 4 weeks since he took double-digit calf kicks. I feel that it's appropriate that Edward comes in as a sizable favorite, even though Muhammad has been the more active party. He comes in a bit damaged. The co-main event is also a top 15 matchup. It's in the light heavyweight division. Number 11, Misha Serkinov, takes on number 13, Ryan Spann. Serkinov debuted with the UFC on a 4-fight win streak, ran that all the way up to 8, and since then has won only 2 of his last 5 fights. 2 and 3 in those last 5, but the last 2, both coming by submission, actually won 2 of his last 3 after halting a 2-fight skid. While on the other side, Ryan Spann won 8 in a row until his last fight, a loss to Johnny Walker. Both guys are submission threats. Serkinov, 13 finishes, 9 submissions. Well, Spann has 15 finishes, 11 submissions. They're big guys, they can both strike, but I think this is going to be a battle to see who can get on top and then impose their will. The featured fight is going to be heavyweight action. Ben Rothwell, a vet who's been competing since 2001, taking on 2018 PFL heavyweight champion Felipe Lins, who is 0-2 in the UFC and is kind of disappointed since signing with the promotion. But these guys are both finishers. Lins, 12 finishes, 8 knockouts out of his 14 wins. Rothwell, 34 finishes of his 38 wins, 28 coming by knockout. On short notice, we're having Gavin Tucker, 13-1, top Canadian prospect, make a big jump towards the rankings as he takes on number 9 Dan Ige. Ige last July had a 6-fight win streak, ended in a war against Calvin Kattar. You know that Ige can scrap. The guy has tons of heart. Kattar, he's a finisher. 10 finishes, 6 by submission. Also on the card, you have number 12 ranked women's strawweight Angela Hill taking on Ashley Yoder. This one is a rematch. It was supposed to happen 3 weeks ago. COVID protocols scrapped the fight. It's been quickly rebooked. And opening up the main card, don't blink, this one could lead to a big knockout. Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart in the middleweight division. Anders, 9 finishes, 8 knockouts. Stewart, 8 finishes, 7 knockouts. That one is going to start off with fireworks to get the main card going.